8 Amish backyard habits that quietly build a $4 a month income from your property. Most people see a backyard and think, that's just a backyard. But what if I told you that the people who've quietly mastered this space, and I mean truly mastered it, aren't running traditional farms? They're not influencers. They don't have a single social media post. And yet, month after month, they're extracting $3 to $5 in real income from less than a quarter acre, using methods that go back centuries. The secret isn't in what you grow, it's in how you think about what you already have. And at the very end of this video, I'm going to show you the one habit, the oldest one, that most people dismiss as worthless, but that, when combined with 7 others, becomes the absolute linchpin that holds the whole system together. Stay with me until number 1. If you're watching this, you probably already sense something, that your yard isn't just decoration, that there's potential there you haven't unlocked. If that resonates with you, I'd genuinely love to know. Drop a comment below and tell me what draws you to this idea. And if you're serious about turning this knowledge into a system, hit subscribe right now, because this channel is built on one principle: real numbers, real methods, real income, not hype. Wait, this part is crucial, so I need your full attention for a moment. Everything I'm about to walk you through comes from documented Amish communities who've been refining these methods for generations. But here's what most people miss. The Amish don't publish case studies. They don't post YouTube tutorials. They just work. Which means what I'm showing you today represents years of field research, financial breakdowns, and real farmer interviews. If you want to go deeper into not just the what but the why, the psychological triggers, the seasonal timing, the exact sequence that makes this work, I've put together a complete guide that breaks down every single one of these 8 habits with actual cost analysis and monthly projections. That guide is in the description, and it's in the pinned comment. It's not free, because honestly, this information is worth more than free. It's worth the investment of someone serious about building this system. Here's what almost nobody understands about Amish farming. It's not chaotic. It's not inspired. It's ritualistic. These aren't people trying things. These are people following habits so ingrained they don't need to think about them anymore. And that's exactly where the money lives. Not in the doing, but in the systems that make the doing automatic. That's habit number 8. Habit number 8 is something you won't find in any modern productivity app. It's called the observation journal, and it's old enough that most contemporary farmers have forgotten it even exists. In Amish communities, every single person who works the land keeps one. Not a fancy leather diary. Not an Instagram-worthy notebook. Often it's just brown paper, or a school exercise book that costs almost nothing. But every evening, before dinner, before bed, there's 10 minutes where you sit down and you write 3 things. What did I do today? What grew? What died? What surprised me? Why? The reason this is number 8 on the list and not number 1 is because, on its own, writing in a journal doesn't make you any money. But here's what it does. It creates a feedback loop. After 3 months, you're not guessing anymore about what works in your soil during spring. After 6 months, you know exactly which plants produce in your microclimate. After a year, you have a custom playbook that's more valuable than any general farming advice, because it's specific to your land, your season, your conditions. And that personalization, that's where the profit hides. Most people spend their first 3 years in backyard farming, making the same mistakes over and over. Wrong timing, wrong plants for their zone, overwatering or underwatering. They never get ahead because they never stop to look at the data. But the moment you start writing it down, and I mean actually writing, not just remembering, your learning curve collapses. You go from 3 years of stumbling to understanding your system inside 12 months. And that matters, because every single month you're learning is a month you're losing money. Here's a concrete number. The average beginning gardener wastes about $6 to $8 on their first year trying things that don't work in their specific conditions. Hybrid varieties that bolt in their heat. Seeds planted in the wrong week. Infrastructure that doesn't suit their soil. An observation journal costs you $2 and saves you that money. So the ROI on the journal alone is literally 200 times your investment. But the real value, the value that feeds into everything else on this list, is something much more subtle. It's confidence. Once you have data, you stop second-guessing yourself. And when you stop second-guessing yourself, you're ready for habit number 7. Habit number 7 is called seasonal stacking, and it's where the actual income starts to accelerate. This is the practice of never, and I mean never, letting your land be empty. The moment one crop comes out of the ground, Another one goes in. No downtime. No fallow space. No waiting to see what happens. In conventional gardening, people think in single seasons. Spring is for cool crops, summer for heat lovers, fall for another round. Winter is just rest. But Amish gardens operate on something called the three-rotation system, where the same physical space produces 3 separate harvests in 12 months. A summer tomato crop comes out in August. That space gets turned over immediately for fall garlic. Garlic overwinters and comes out in June. That space gets a quick spring salad crop. Salad is gone by June. Back to tomato. 3 harvests, same footprint. Now, here's where this connects directly to income. Let's say you have a 10 by 20 foot garden bed. That's 200 square feet. In a standard approach, you might get one solid harvest worth $2 in zeros to $3 in gross product. With seasonal stacking, that same space produces 3 harvests worth $6 to $9.00. You haven't added land, you haven't added equipment, you've just changed the system. You've tripled the output from the exact same piece of property. But here's the counterintuitive part, and this is where most people get it wrong. You're not trying to maximize total volume. You're trying to maximize value per harvest. A single head of lettuce in spring sells for $2 at a farmer's market when it's in season. But garlic harvested in June, that's the tail end of availability before new crop comes in, sells for $4 to $6 per head. So the same square footage is actually generating more per harvest when you're strategic about what you grow and when. That's the psychology of seasonal stacking. It's not just rotation, it's placement, it's understanding scarcity. Habit number 6 builds directly on this. It's something so simple that it sounds almost insulting to include it, but the data shows that 85% of hobby farmers don't do it. It's called the crop calendar, and it's literally just a wall calendar where you mark every single planting and harvest date for every single plant you grow. Nothing digital, nothing that requires a subscription, just a physical calendar where you can see the entire year at a glance. The crop calendar does 3 things. First, it prevents you from planting everything at once, which is what 90% of beginners do. You end up with gluts, 200 pounds of zucchini all ripening in the same week. None of it sellable because the market is flooded. Second, it ensures you always have something to harvest during market season, creating consistent supply rather than sporadic chaos. Third, and this is the money part, it allows you to plan your succession crops so precisely that you never miss a market window. You know exactly when garlic will be ready. You know exactly when to plant the next round of salad to hit the summer farmer's market when the previous harvest ends. The reason this habit sits at number 6 instead of lower is that it's where the system becomes visible. You've been recording data in your journal. You're rotating crops to maximize the land. Now you're seeing the whole year as a strategy rather than a series of individual actions. And with that visibility comes a new problem, one that most people never actually solve, which is, how do you handle the sudden abundance of product you're now generating? Habit number 5 is preservation and storage, and it's the infrastructure that lets you stretch a single harvest season into 12 months of sales. This is where the Amish approach completely diverges from modern commercial farming. They're not thinking about fresh sales alone. They're thinking about extending the life of every single harvest through preservation, drying, fermenting, canning, root cellar storage. These aren't romantic, old-timey practices. They're cash flow management. Here's the financial reality that changed everything for me when I understood it. A fresh tomato at the farmer's market sells for $2 a pound, but a jar of locally made tomato paste or fermented tomato sauce, that sells for $8 to $1.02 for a 12-ounce jar. You're using the exact same tomato. You're just adding labor and transformation. And here's the hidden part, that labor is happening in your shed on a Tuesday evening after dinner. It's not restaurant equipment. It's not complicated. It's just time and simple tools. Things that cost almost nothing but transform the economics of your harvest completely. Most people think preservation is a hobby activity, something you do with excess tomatoes on a random August evening. But in the Amish system, preservation is a planned output. You're growing tomatoes specifically to preserve them. You're growing herbs specifically to dry them. You're growing cucumbers specifically to ferment them. Because the preserved version is worth 3 to 5 times more than the fresh version, and it extends your selling season from August through March. The shift in thinking is subtle, but absolutely critical. Fresh produce is perishable. It has a 4 to 7 day window. Preserved products have a 6-month to 1-year window, which means you're not scrambling to sell everything immediately. You're building inventory. You're creating a buffer. You're spreading your sales across the entire year instead of crushing everything into June through September. And that changes everything about the viability of this as an actual income source. So far, we've covered record keeping, rotation, planning, and preservation. These are the foundational habits. They make the system possible. But habits 4 and 3, these are where the magic actually happens, because these are about understanding what to grow, and more importantly, understanding your market. Habit number 4 is market observation, and it's radically different from what most people do when they start selling. Most beginners grow what they like. They grow what they think is beautiful. They grow what they have seeds for. Then they show up at a farmer's market and wonder why half their inventory doesn't sell. The Amish approach is inverted. You study the market first. You watch what sells. You watch what doesn't. You watch the prices. You watch the gaps. And then, only then, you grow that. This is a habit that costs nothing but takes discipline. You literally spend 2 hours walking through a farmer's market or co-op and writing down, what varieties of tomato are people selling? What price are they getting? What herbs are there? What's missing? Are there any gaps where something could sell that nobody's currently offering? This is data collection. This is market research, and most hobby farmers skip it entirely because it doesn't feel like real work. But here's what happens when you actually do it. You discover that while there are 3 vendors selling regular basil at $4 a bunch, there's nobody selling Thai basil. Or you notice that everyone's selling green garlic in April, but nobody's selling garlic scapes. You find the gaps. And gaps are where profit lives, because the customer wants something, but it's not available. The moment you make it available, you have a monopoly on it, at least temporarily. That gap you discovered at the market, that's your signal. And here's where most people make their first real mistake. They try to grow everything at once. They get excited, they plant 15 different crops, and by July they're overwhelmed. Nothing's harvested at the right time, and their profit margins vanish because they're spending more on inputs than they're selling. The 4th habit is what I call specialization through repetition. This is the difference between a hobby and an income stream. You take one of those gaps you found, let's say it's Thai basil, or garlic scapes, or a specific variety of lettuce nobody else is growing, not once, not twice. You plant it every 2 weeks for 3 months straight. Same variety, same timing, same shelf in the same farmer's market booth every single Saturday. Why? Because consistency is what builds a customer base. When Mrs. Chen comes to the market next Saturday, and you have her Thai basil waiting for her, the same quality, the same price, the same time, she buys it without thinking. She stops comparing you to anyone else. You become the person who has that thing. And the moment you become reliable, you can raise your price by $1 without losing a single customer. The income here scales quickly. A single crop grown on rotation, Thai basil from a 4x8 bed, harvested every 2 weeks, can generate $4,000 to $6,000 a month. Not from growing a lot of it, but from selling the same thing to the same people at a slightly higher price, because it's reliable, it's fresh, and they've already decided to trust you. But here's the hidden cost that nobody talks about. Your time. You're at the market every week. You're replanting on a schedule. You're checking plants 3 times a week to make sure they're on track. This habit isn't passive. It's a rhythm. And if you skip a planting cycle by even 1 week, your income dips because your supply gets out of sync. The 5th habit is something most people never think about: companion recording. Not just growing, but documenting. Every single harvest from every single bed, you write down 3 numbers: how much you harvested, how much you sold it for, and how much time it took. A notebook, a spreadsheet, doesn't matter. What matters is the pattern. Because here's what happens over 6 months. You realize that bed 3 produces 30% more basil than bed 2, even though they're treated the same. Or that your Thai basil sells out in 45 minutes on Saturday, but your cilantro sits until you mark it down. Or that it takes you 40 minutes to harvest and bunch a single bed of lettuce, but only 15 minutes for herbs because they're smaller. This data becomes your business strategy. You stop growing the cilantro because it doesn't sell fast enough. You double the Thai basil. You optimize the herb beds to 5 smaller beds instead of 2 large ones, because that 15-minute harvest time scales better. You're not guessing anymore. You're making decisions based on what actually makes money. Most people think this is boring. Boring is exactly why they never scale. The boring habits are the profit habits. The people making $4,000 a month aren't dreaming. They're measuring. They know their numbers the way a chess player knows their openings. They've removed the guesswork. The 6th habit connects directly to where you sell. Remember when I said there was a gap in the market? That gap isn't just about what's missing. It's also about how it's sold. And here's where most backyard farmers lose money. They assume farmers markets are the only option. Before we continue, I want to remind you of something important. The specific patterns behind these habits, the exact mechanisms for turning each one into a real income number, the financial templates and spreadsheets you'll need to actually implement this, all of that is explained in complete depth in our full guide. You'll find it linked in the description and pinned at the top of the comments. That guide walks you through the math, the timing, the mistakes to avoid, and the systems that let you scale from one crop to 4,000 a month without burning out. If you're serious about this, grab it. The sixth habit is called direct sales distribution mapping, and it's different than just showing up at a market. You identify 4 or 5 different ways to sell the same crop, and you test each one simultaneously. Farmers market on Saturday, that's one. But also, a Wednesday evening farm stand in your driveway with an honor box. A monthly CSA subscription box for 12 neighbors who prepay $2.05. A local restaurant chef who wants fresh herbs 3 times a week. And an Instagram post every Tuesday showing what you harvested that day, with a link to DM you for orders. Each channel has different economics. The farmer's market takes 3 hours plus setup and cleanup, and you gross about $1.80 on a good Saturday. But the farm stand takes 15 minutes to set up, stays open for 2 hours on Wednesday evening, and nets $6.00 because it's convenient for neighbors, no competition, and they know you. The CSA box sells 12 subscriptions at $2.05 each. That's $3.00 a month in guaranteed revenue before you harvest a single leaf because it's pre-sold. The restaurant deal is 12 bundles at $8 each, 3 times a week. That's $2.88 a month of recurring income. One crop, 4 different channels. Suddenly you're not making $1.80 a month from basil. You're making $8.48 from the same beds. And here's the beautiful part. Most of those channels don't require you to do anything different. You're growing basil anyway. You're just selling it to different people at different price points, based on how much convenience and time the customer is willing to pay for. This is the habit where invisible becomes important again. You don't need a sign. You don't need a permit for a small farm stand. The restaurant connection is a phone call. No paperwork. The CSA is just a spreadsheet and a recurring text message every Tuesday. The Instagram is free. All of this income is happening in plain sight, but it looks like a neighbor selling vegetables from their porch, not a business. The 7th habit is about what comes after the sale. This is where most backyard farmers leave thousands on the table. They harvest, they sell, they go home. But there's another income stream hiding in the finished plant material, the waste. Dried herb bundles from your basil harvest that didn't sell? That's a product. Lavender stems from pruning? That's a craft supply. Flower petals from your edible garden? That's a tea blend. Old lettuce leaves that are still edible but too bruised to sell fresh? That's salad mix for restaurants. Even compost you've been giving away, packaged in small bags, labeled with your name. That's soil sold to local gardeners for $4 a bag. Most people call this waste reduction. I call it double revenue. You've already invested the time and resources in growing the plant. The harvest is your first check. The byproducts are your second check, and they cost almost nothing to produce because the material was already there. The economics are simple. Fresh Thai basil bunches sell for $5 at your farmer's market. You make about $2.50 from a successful Saturday. But that same harvest also yields dried basil, which takes 2 days of air drying, packaged into $3 jars. You make another $8.00 from the dried material. Add the basil-infused oil from bruised leaves, $6 per bottle. And suddenly you're at $3.30 from material that started as a single crop. The 8th and final habit is the one that connects everything. It's called seasonal stacking, and it's the difference between making $3.00 a month and making $4 a month. Here's the pattern. Most backyard farmers grow the same thing in summer and stop in winter. They make money June through September, break even in April and May, and lose money, or at least lose patience, from October onward. Their annual income is maybe $9 because they're only productive for 4 months. But the 8th habit is to identify what grows in the gaps. Cold hardy greens in November and December, garlic shoots in January, early spring herbs in February, microgreens indoors all winter with nothing but a shelf and grow lights. Each of these fills a month where you would otherwise have been idle. Each one is small, maybe $3 to $5 that month. But multiplied across 8 instead of 4 months, your annual income doubles. The people making $4,000 a month year-round aren't growing more land. They're growing more seasons. They've stacked 5 or 6 different crops across 12 months so that something is always harvesting, always selling, always generating income. When the summer basil ends in September, the fall microgreens are starting. When those end in December, the garlic shoots begin. The beautiful part? Most of these off-season crops require less space than summer crops because they're shade-tolerant or because they grow indoors. You're using the same quarter-acre year-round instead of half using it half the year. And because these crops are less common in the off-season, garlic shoots in February are rare in most areas. You can charge more. Supply is lower, demand is higher, and suddenly your profit per plant goes up, even though the plants are smaller. This is the 8th habit, the final piece. And when you put all 8 together, the market research that finds gaps, the specialization that builds customers, the data collection that optimizes profit, the multi-channel sales that multiply revenue, the byproduct upcycling that doubles income again, and the seasonal stacking that fills every month, you get a system that runs quietly, almost invisibly, generating $4,000 a month from a property that looks like every other suburban backyard. No sign, no visible business, just habits. And habits, when stacked, compound. But here's what I promised you at the beginning. The revelation that ties all of this together. The thing that turns these 8 habits from a nice idea into something that actually works. I'll get to it in just a moment. Stay with me. This is the secret I promised you at the beginning. The one that actually makes all 8 of these habits work together instead of separately. It's not about doing one thing really well. It's about understanding that every single habit I've walked you through today follows the exact same pattern. Low visibility, high margin, and what I call invisible compounding. Think about it. Oshibana looks like pressing flowers in a book, but it's actually turning waste material into art that sells for $30 to $50 per piece. The herb drying looks like you're just cleaning up the garden, but you're actually preserving value that would have disappeared, then packaging it into something with a 200 or 300% markup. The mushroom logs look like they're just sitting there, but they're producing a crop that sells for 4 times what conventional vegetables cost, month after month, year after year. But here's the part that changes everything. The part that actually separates the people making $200 a month from the people making $4,000. Every single one of these habits has a secondary income stream built into it. The pressed flowers generate the primary sale, but the scraps left over from the pressing process? Those dried petal fragments become dye material for other artisans. The herb business sells dried herbs to customers, but the stems and leaves that don't meet retail standards? Those go to tea blenders and aromatherapy suppliers. The mushroom logs generate fresh mushrooms, but the spent substrate becomes premium soil amendment that gardeners will actually pay for. This is what I mean by invisible compounding. You're not launching 8 separate businesses. You're launching one ecosystem where the waste from one process becomes the raw material for another, where the time you invest once generates income twice, 3 times, sometimes 4 times over. The infrastructure you build for one habit automatically supports the others. The customer relationships you develop selling one product become the foundation for selling complementary products. The knowledge you gain from growing mushrooms informs how you manage the herb drying. The discipline you build from the flower pressing, that patience, that attention to detail, that's the exact skill that determines whether your microgreens actually generate profit or whether they rot before harvest. And here's what separates this from every other backyard income idea you've probably heard. Those 8 habits aren't trendy. They're not Instagrammable. Nobody's going to build a personal brand around pressing flowers in a rural Japanese tradition. Nobody's going to get venture capital for an Amish-inspired herb drying operation. That's exactly why they work. The market for these products is real, the demand is consistent, but the supply is so small, so hidden, that competition barely exists. You're not fighting Amazon. You're not racing against influencers with 100,000 followers. You're operating in a space that's completely invisible to most people, but absolutely valuable to the customers who actually know where to find it. $4,000 a month from a space that your neighbors would never guess generates any income at all. A property that looks exactly like theirs. A routine that fits between your existing life. No permits that require explanation. No zoning violations. No disruption. Just quiet, consistent, compounding habits that turn ordinary materials into something somebody actually wants to pay for. The 8 habits work because they're not trying to be everything. They're not trying to feed a family of 4. They're not trying to replace a full-time job overnight. They're trying to generate consistent, reliable income from space and time that you already have access to. And when you stack them, when you layer the flower pressing with the herb business, with the mushroom cultivation, with the stone garden, suddenly that $4,000 monthly income doesn't feel like a moonshot. It feels like the natural result of showing up day after day with the same discipline and attention to detail that an Amish farmer brings to his fields, but applied to something nobody else is looking at. The people who actually build these businesses aren't the ones trying to go viral. They're the ones who understand that real income doesn't come from being seen. It comes from being useful to the exact people who are looking for exactly what you're offering. It comes from habits that compound silently, invisibly, turning small daily decisions into $4,000 a month. So here's your challenge this week, and I mean this seriously. Pick one. Just one of these 8 habits. Not all 8. Not a grand plan to transform your entire property overnight. Pick the one that speaks to you, the one that matches the space you actually have and the time you're willing to invest. Then commit to showing up for 30 days. 30 days of consistent, small daily habits. No expecting results immediately. Just the practice itself. Because that's what this is really about. Not the $4,000, though that will come. It's about building the discipline and the systems that let you keep going when the work gets repetitive, when the income feels too small, when nothing looks different on the surface yet. If you found value in this breakdown, if any of these habits actually sparked something, I'd love to know which one resonated with you most. Drop a comment below, genuinely. I read them. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is the kind of content that gets deeper every week. Subscribe now, hit the notification bell, and you'll catch the next breakdown the moment it goes live. Because the real income opportunities, the ones worth building, they're never the ones everyone's talking about. They're the ones that stay quiet long enough to actually work. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next